Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of PV in Focus. I'm Gilbert Davidson, and I have the honor to serve as Prescott Valley Town Manager. And I'll be one of your hosts as we dive into what makes our town tick and the issues that matter most. We're so excited to bring you along on this journey, giving you an inside look at the people, the work, and the dedication that keep Prescott Valley running. This isn't just a podcast. It's a videocast, meaning you can listen on the go or watch and experience the action firsthand. Think of it as a podcast, but with an extra layer of fun. On the audio side, we'll be sitting down with some of the movers and shakers in our organization and community, learning what they do, why they do it, and the impact they're making. Now, one of the best parts of my job is working alongside some truly incredible people. Every day I see firsthand the dedication, skill, and heart that go into making Prescott Valley a great place to live. Getting to know our team members across different departments and our partner organizations has been a true honor, and I can't wait to share with you their stories. No matter the title, every team member plays a crucial role in serving our community. Whether they're behind the scenes supporting infrastructure or on the front lines working with residents, their mission is the same: providing exceptional service to the people of Prescott Valley. And that's what this videocast is all about. So, who are the people making it all happen? What do they do? What kind of skill does it take? What are the issues affecting our community? All of these questions and more will be asked as we explore PV in Focus. So, come along for the ride. This is your chance to see our high-performing team at work and learn more about the issues that concern all of us. I can't wait to kick off this series, share these incredible stories, and celebrate the people who make Prescott Valley such a fantastic place to live, work, and visit.
We'll be taking care of PV every day, taking care of PV everywhere. We've been taking care of PV, it's all ours, taking care of PV and investing in our town, PV.
Hello and welcome to PV in Focus. We wanted to kick off our first episode with a very important issue, an issue that many in our community are talking about and have concern with. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Town of Prescott Valley Water Resources Advisor, Tracy Lund. We are going to be talking about water. Thank you, Tracy, for joining me. This is our first episode of PV in Focus, and just really, I think what we're going to be talking about is such an important issue for our community, and I'm excited to learn more from you and help to share and educate those that are listening to our video and podcast. So before we dig into some of the water stuff, can you, a little bit of background of yourself? How long have you been with the town? And here's the big pressing question. What is a water resources advisor? What does that do?
So I've been with the town for 3 years now. And I wasn't always a water resources advisor, but I moved up into that position just over a year ago. And essentially what I do is I think about all of the ways that we can actually ensure that we have water for the future. And I'm thinking not just about quantity. I am a water chemistry nerd by training, and therefore I'm also thinking about quality. So you can't have one without the other. And, obviously we're in the desert, so we're mostly concerned with quantity, but we have to make sure that the water that we have access to is useful for drinking, because that's primarily what we're selling water for.
Well, it's a very important position, and I appreciate that you talked about it. There's two parts to that. There's not only making sure we have enough water, but it's the quality of water and the assurance that when people turn on that tap and take a drink, that it's reassured that someone is paying attention to what's in the mix and making sure that it's a good clean water source for everyone. So to kind of set the stage for this, and again, why we're leading off with this particular topic is there's a lot of concern in our community, in our area, really around the state about water and that we're running out of water. Are we running out of water?
It's a complicated issue.
I figured it would be.
So what the deal is it's not going to happen next week.
Okay, that's good.
So it's not an acute issue. It's more of a chronic issue, right? So we have in this area and in Arizona in general, used water maybe more than we should. However, and that has actually driven past legislation, actions at the state level to actually make sure that we are using it as responsibly as we possibly can.
Let me jump in real quick on what you just said, in terms of the use of the water over a historic period of time. A lot of that original use, especially in our area, was agricultural uses, right?
Yes.
It wasn't development uses which today, in today's modern times, that's what's using a lot of the water, but
Yes.
It really was agricultural uses.
It was. So as late as mid 80s, there was a lot of irrigation that was happening within this area, within the Prescott Active Management area, and so the driving force for groundwater mining, I guess you could call it, was of irrigation. And over time, as farming has kind of not died out here, but irrigation-based farming has
replaced
receded.
with
It's receded. Yeah. And so primarily these days it's on the agricultural front. Grazing of cattle is the primary use these days. So, but on the other hand, as that use was tapering off, that irrigation use was tapering off, more homes were being built in this area because it's a beautiful area. People want to live here, right? And that's always been the case. And so it's that change in water use over time has been monitored at the state level to try to keep everything closer to being in balance in this particular area.
So you mentioned, it's not necessarily the water concern really isn't about today. It's about, what we're working towards and what, we want everyone to understand is we're looking out multi-generations. We want to make sure we have
Yes.
water for future generations to live and be a part of this beautiful valley just like we are today.
Yes.
But, I've read, there's been articles recently about, wells in some areas of the basin and the AMA that have gone dry. What's going on there? Why would some wells go dry but others aren't?
Okay, so this is where my background in hydrogeology comes into play. Frequently, what hydrogeology and geology in particular is a really interesting and fickle thing. So a lot of times, as you're looking at an aquifer where your groundwater is stored, the properties of an aquifer in one area can be completely different as little as 50 to 100 feet away from there, right? So you can have a really great water-filled portion of the aquifer around one well, and their next door neighbor doesn't have enough water for their household use. So that's, personally, that's why I live in town, because traditionally well drillers have been really good at finding large pockets of water for those wells that need them, right? A smaller private domestic well doesn't necessarily need to be in a large enough pocket to provide for multiple households, right? So that's why those houses tend to, when they compete against each other, because wells, there's a lot of little straws in that particular region of the aquifer. They're all competing potentially for the same water in that aquifer. In this particular area, where we are directly over the center of the Prescott Valley area, right? The aquifer we presume is a lot deeper than it is at the sides of the aquifer, the edges of the
Besides
basin.
being where the mountains, closer to the mountains.
Exactly. So closer to Mingus, that aquifer is actually a bit more shallow. And so then therefore there are fewer places for the water to collect. The water doesn't just sit there, it moves over time through the aquifer and finds the low points and then comes out at the surface and moves downstream. So you're dealing with a lot of different influences when you have a small well. So and we as geologists have good guesses as to what we're seeing in the subsurface, but we don't. It is a guess. It's an educated guess, but it's still a guess. And so if you have a 2-acre parcel that you buy, obviously you're only going to be able to put the well somewhere on that 2-acre parcel. So it becomes a matter of chance whether or not you get a part of the aquifer that is productive or not. That's just one reason why a well can dry out. There are pump issues.
Don't you have different stratas too?
Yep.
So depending on the depth, I mean, you could hit a pocket of water. Then you could, if you drill deeper, you may hit some other stuff where there's not a lot of water, and then even get further down and hit another.
Well, and one of the things that I think about is, okay, so if you happened to buy your parcel 25, 30 years ago, right, and you didn't have any neighbors, oh great, I have no neighbors. You only had that driller go as deep as they needed to
Because it's
hit
expensive.
water. Exactly.
It's very expensive.
And then suddenly you have neighbors and they're able to go deeper. So it's very possible that that competition between those wells then dries out your well, and you have to then drill your well deeper. So that's just one. There's another issue that could be happening. Also, I mean, wells don't last forever. Well pumps don't last forever. Everything associated with that system has a shelf life. And if you don't keep up with that, then there's going to be a cost to that. There are pockets of our aquifer that actually can be corrosive to well casing. So your casing may collapse. It may collapse
Because of the chemical content of the water.
Yes,
what's
that
the
can
minerals?
happen. That can happen.
Okay.
So all of these things are just a handful of issues. Literally, my colleagues and I have sat down and thought about what are the possible issues that could be impacting a well drying out. I've got plenty of other possible issues that could be gone over. That could be the active ingredient that is in one person's well going dry. That's another thing too. Is it's not a panacea, right? What is impacting this gentleman over here may not be impacting this gentleman over here.
So you can't just label one well going dry as this is what it is.
No.
There could be any number of geologic issues, well issues. So it could be any combination of different things that affects that.
It doesn't take a city well being nearby. That's not the only possible explanation. That's the explanation that a lot of folks rely on, but in a remote part of the aquifer, it's just as likely to be your next door neighbor who is potentially impacting your well.
Kind of, taking that concern that we all have of, water and the possibility of it running out. What has the state done to try to better manage that, especially in areas where we rely on groundwater? We don't have a lot of surface water in this area. There's not a big river running through or big lakes. We live on groundwater. So what has the state done to really try to manage that? So
essentially, the state of Arizona has over time managed, especially in active management areas like we are in the Prescott active management area. So they have set forth a set of rules and criteria that we have to follow as municipal providers that actually ensure that there's a full accounting of the amount of water that we're using and the amount of water that we're recharging into the aquifer. So they're trying to keep the books balanced. And in the cases where where there's active mining of groundwater around the state, they have a ballpark estimate of what that actually looks like in the aquifer. So they are actually keeping an eye on things. They are, whenever we want to drill a new well, there's a number of processes that we need to go through. We need to model potential impacts of that new well on existing wells around it.
So there are very set rules and regulations.
Exactly.
For a municipality that exists in and the government kind of acronym is AMA, the Active Management Area, and
Yep.
AMA. And so that really kind of guides and dictates everything we do as it relates to water management.
We are well regulated.
Okay.
They are keeping an eye on what we're doing.
So, at that state level with an AMA, I want to drill down to our local jurisdiction and what we are doing to really try to think long-term with our water management. And so several years ago, we identified 3 primary goals that are related to our overall water management strategy. First is we want to balance the aquifer. 2, we want to make sure that we have a viable economy. And 3, we want to protect our quality of life. And I want you to just kind of focus in on balancing that aquifer. What does that mean? And then tie that back to that AMA that we were just talking about.
So we, as far as balance is concerned, it's super simple in that, ideally, if we were, in an ideal situation, we would be, for every gallon we were extracting from the aquifer, we were returning that full
so
gallon.
Gallon in, gallon out.
Gallon in, gallon out. That's the
simplistic
goal.
concept.
That's the goal, essentially, right? So we are not achieving that at the moment, but we would like to be able to get to that point. So that's kind of one of the, when I think about what it is that I'm doing on a daily basis, that's what I keep coming back to, is how can we increase the amount of water that we're getting into the aquifer to try to achieve that balance. And that obviously, if we're doing things well and getting towards that, then hypothetically, we're actually getting, we have a reputation then for stewardship, good stewardship of the resource. And then folks will want to come here and ensure that there's a thriving economy here in Prescott Valley.
Great. So, you mentioned, we're not in balance. And so that's obvious. It's a big concern. That's really what I think our, community is concerned about. What are we trying to do in terms of trying to, secure, conserve, and protect our water resources? I know that you are working on a number of different projects and initiatives to really, again, think long-term, how do we bring balance to the aquifer and how do we make sure that we've got, again, that viable economy to make sure we have a healthy, beautiful, wonderful community for everyone that's living here today, but future generations. So what are some of the things that we're working on to start to address these issues?
So one of the things, as in water resources, I'm very concerned with our wastewater recharge, our effluent, right? So we are actually actively trying to expand our operations, making sure that we get even more water into the aquifer in maybe newer areas of the aquifer that won't adversely impact the water quality in our additional wells.
Jump in on that real quick, just so that our listeners and viewers can understand that. So talk about the system. So we pump groundwater, that gets delivered to people's homes, and then they consume water, and some of that gets returned back to a treatment plant, a wastewater treatment plant.
Yep.
So talk about, so what are we doing there? We're taking that water and we're doing what with that?
We are treating it at our advanced treatment facility, the wastewater treatment plant, to the point where it is geochemically balanced, so that way it's going to cause a minimum amount of algal bloom issues downstream of wherever it is that we have a number of different places we put our wastewater effluent. But we want to make sure that we're not impacting the quality of any surface waters that we're sending that effluent into. So we send our effluent to a number of different endpoints, and two of those main endpoints are actually places where we can recharge the aquifer. The water will infiltrate into the aquifer and then recharge the aquifer. We send about 50% of our water out that way. And essentially, it goes to our North Plains recharge facility and the Agua Fria River bottom, and it's recharging the aquifer in those areas. We would like to be able to move that water into new areas of the aquifer without potentially impacting drinking water wells that aren't already impacted by PFAS. We do have PFAS in our effluent. And so we want to make sure...
PFAS, just so people understand, is a...
per and polyfluorinated compounds. So those forever chemicals that everyone talks about.
So in our daily lives, what is that like? We've used products, right, in our home.
Yep.
That gets eventually into the water stream, and that's what these PFAS chemicals are.
So things like Teflon and stain-resistant coatings that are on your couch, your carpet.
Pretty much everything in our lives.
Exactly.
Has
yes.
This stuff,
And they've been in our lives for 50 plus years. So they're everywhere. They do make it into our wastewater, and so then we're burdened with having to try to figure out what to do with that, right? So technologically, it's actually easier to clean it from the drinking water side. We have explored the possibility of removing it from our wastewater effluent, but it is prohibitively expensive. So we need to be then, in order to ensure that we're good stewards of the aquifer quality-wise, water quality-wise, we need to make sure that we're not impacting our own drinking water wells, because that's at least $3 million per well to treat that PFAS out of that water.
But we will be having to talk about that as a community of having to invest eventually. A lot of communities around our state and the country are looking, fully using all of their effluent water, cleaning it to a drinking water standard, and just putting it right back into the system.
Yes.
We are not there yet. We're not. Years from that.
Yes.
But we do need to think about that to make sure we're maximizing every drop of water in our community.
Yes, and making sure that we're taking advantage of some of the properties of those chemicals to make sure that we're not spreading them more widely within the aquifer, right? So there are some things that we can use to our benefit to try to keep those chemicals from moving more into the aquifer. So that's the effluent side. We want to get as much of our effluent back into the aquifer as we can, because obviously we're pulling pretty hard from the aquifer.
Big effort there.
Yes.
What are some of the other things that we're doing to think about overall water management and to bring more water to the table? So
stormwater is a really, so we're kind of encroaching on a water law issue here, but here's the thing. So we have built here.
So let's say a little bit more about that. So, and we don't want to. We could spend probably hours talking about water law issues, but stormwater, once it gets into a drainage way, a creek, or a natural waterway, that becomes someone else's water downstream.
It does.
So that's what you're referring to.
So we need to be able to collect whatever stormwater we can that doesn't encroach on those downstream water rights, and try to get it back in the aquifer. Because when you build up a home, a development, you're actually creating impervious surfaces, right? So the water that used to be able to infiltrate into the aquifer no longer can do it right there. So it collects and pools and moves downstream, causes more erosion.
More storm runoff.
Exactly.
That could be okay.
So that water that is now newly interacting with impervious surfaces isn't actually isn't actually owned by any downstream water rights
So
because
you're talking about, so water, a drop of water has hit the roof, and then that water's going to a gutter. So that's
is.
not in a drainage way yet.
It is
so
not
that
in a drainage
water
way.
could be used to recharge or
it
do
could.
something.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we are actually in the process of designing it with the intent to build 3 for sure facilities here in the town on town-owned buildings to actually get stormwater that's collecting on those roofs down into the aquifer. With the hope that that does get deeper into the aquifer. You're not going to be able to, if you're not trying to get it to infiltrate into the aquifer, it's probably not going to get there. We live in a desert. Evaporation is a really strong force here.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'm a native Arizonan. I've, grew up in the southern part of our state, which has even less water. And, I had always, learned in school and just, growing up in the community that evaporation is the biggest impact to this. So when we have a big rain event, a lot of that is either just running off or it's evaporating. What really helps us is good snowpack in the mountain areas that then feed back into the aquifer.
Yes.
Am I
Yeah,
correct?
90, at least 95% of the water that in a rainstorm that falls on the surface is going downstream or back into the atmosphere via evaporation. So we have to, basically the name of the game is to get that water into the ground as quickly as possible.
Okay. So we've got a project that you're going to be working on, and you mentioned 3 different sites in our community.
Yes.
We're also working, I believe, with the tribe, the
Yavapai Prescott. Yep.
tribe. So that's a great partnership that we have with them in really seeing if this could work and try to maximize as much of our water resources as we can. And I just shout out, I know a lot of our listeners and viewers have rain barrels and other types of things that people are putting on their homes. So it's very similar, right? So people may collect, smaller amounts of water. You're going to be hopefully collecting a whole bunch of water that's going right back into the ground.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So there's a difference in scale here, of course.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, rain barrels are great and great for home use, but a rain barrel isn't going to collect everything that's coming off of the wheelhouse roof.
Right.
There's going to be a lot more water there,
Or
and
the
so
civic
that which
center,
yes,
yeah.
so which is good because the bigger the amount of water you've got, the more likely it is to get deep. So we're really hoping that we can get that water deep.
Exciting project.
Yeah, and it's grant funded, so that's a fabulous,
So grant funded, no
free
local
money.
funds being used, or
Well,
very little.
we do
very
have to
little
match. There's a grant
Okay.
matching, yes.
So, but very few local funds, but we are able to use some external grant funds.
Yes.
I know that there's you're working on another project that may have some great promise. Tell us a little bit about that. It's also dealing with stormwater, but in a different way.
So yeah, we've really been emphasizing low impact development principles here of late, and so we in utilities. I'm a part of the utilities department. We've been working with our colleagues in stormwater in the Public Works Department. So what we're trying to do is open up opportunities to get stormwater that would normally be flooding because of the proliferation of stormwater that's coming about because of impervious surfaces, right? So we can do this in sub-watersheds, at the sub-watershed level, to try to get as much of that water into the ground as possible. So we have a pilot project that we're working on, pretty early stages yet, that will actually allow us to hopefully get that water super deep, super fast. What the deal is we put, they're made by a company called Parjana, they're called irises. They are long tubular plastic things that can be driven into the aquifer to various depths. You make a nest of these things in the bottom of a stormwater pond, and that water then moves into the subsurface that much faster. And the quicker you can get that water, the quicker you can get a lot of water deep, the more impact you're going to have.
Well, you're
on the
getting past
aquifer
that
levels.
evaporation zone, which is
Exactly.
really where we lose most of our water.
Exactly,
Is
yes.
that evap zone. But Mother Nature still gets to do her thing too of cleaning that water. So
Yes.
once it gets past that evaporation zone, whatever the amoebas and other things that exist, subsurface.
They're just bacteria. Yeah.
Whatever, the little things that you can't see, but they do magic with
Yep.
water. That still would take place as part of this process.
Yeah, what the deal is so okay, let's trot out some hydrogeology verbiage here. So the
have to-
Vados zone.
Make it simple. Yeah.
So from the surface, you have the way an aquifer is generally laid out. You've got the surface, and then you've got an envelope of the aquifer that is not saturated. It's the Vados zone, right? So it's not saturated, but there's bacteria everywhere. They're on every surface that are around us, right? They're also on soil particles, and there are giant ecosystems on these soil particles. They will, when they are woken up by water, then that actually activates a metabolism that we can take advantage of. So if we send a slug of water into this Vados zone, wake up the microbes, new metabolisms form or are put into process to actually strip, oils and different pollutants basically that might be in that water. The key is to try to get that infiltration to happen as close to where the water fell so you don't have pollution in it, but you can't always do that. The Vados zone, though, and all the microbes that live in there can be a really great ally for that.
Great.
So, yeah.
Sounds like an exciting pilot project. And we are working with some partners on it. So I believe Salt River Project, which has a big interest in obviously the watershed in northern Arizona,
Yes.
is at the table with us. We've got some other outside experts working, eventually with the state. If this is proven, this could be something that not only we get to take advantage of, but others around the state may be very much interested in what we're doing here in Prescott Valley.
Yeah, we're doing cutting edge work essentially at this point. So it's a little R&D in addition to our normal compliance activities that we do on a daily basis.
It sounds like we've got a number of projects. I'm sure there's many more, and we could talk forever on some of the other things. But I wanted to jump to another big topic related to water that we hear a lot about, and there's been a lot said about this project, this initiative over the years, and it's something called the Big Chino. What is the Big Chino, and why is that important to us?
A number of decades ago, ADWR actually put on the record that this particular area, Prescott Active Management Area, really does need importation of water, right? So much like the Phoenix and Tucson areas have been able to get the Central Arizona Project water to come from the Colorado River, and then they can use that water in both the Phoenix and Tucson metro areas. We also need similar infrastructure to actually be able to import water into this area. So as part of allocation of that CAP water, the Central Arizona Project, aka CAP, as part of that activity, it was decided by the city of Prescott, who actually also got an allocation of CAP water, that there needed to be an initiative locally to actually import water into the area. One of the key areas in the state of Arizona that does have a lot of water at the moment is the Big Chino Basin. So it's a sub-basin. It's to the north of here, north and northwest of here by about 25 miles.
Outside of Paulden, right?
It
The
is,
Paulden
it
area.
is, yep. And it is one of the basins that feeds water into the headwaters of the Verde River. So obviously the Verde River is a really important resource for the entire state of Arizona. Impacting that is a non-starter, obviously. So back in the day, there was discussion of, how do you import that water without impacting the headwaters. So since, let's see, I want to say 2008, when and I may be wrong about the date, so I apologize for that.
We won't hold that to you.
Thank you. So essentially, there was by state statute basically an allowance for Prescott Active Management area, the water providers in that area, to be able to import from the Big Chino. So it's on state rule. It's state statute. It's on the books.
I just want to jump in there real quick and make I think a really important point about what you just said. Even with, conservation, even if there was zero growth, like we didn't allow, there was never one more home, one more business, one more person was allowed to move in to this basin, to this AMA. We are overdrafting the aquifer.
We are,
right?
And have been for decades.
So that will continue no matter what
Yes.
with current conditions.
Yeah, even if we didn't ever build another house.
So importing water has to be part of the equation, whether it's the Big Chino, whether it's water from somewhere else. Somewhere, somehow, additional water's got to be brought into the region
Yes.
for the long-term needs of the area.
And this was intended to help address that, right? So since, I want to say 2011, again, I'm terrible with dates on this sort of thing, but we've been working with the city of Prescott to actually realize our portion then of what the Big Chino water would be. So the city of Prescott purchased the Big Chino Water Ranch, and there are historically irrigated acreage that is associated with that ranch. There's also the state statute allocated waters that are part of that. And so we've been working with the city of Prescott to actually determine, number one, determine what the present conditions of that aquifer are, right? So how much water is there, how much is going out into the Verde River as base flow into the Verde, just be able to better understand the dynamics of water in and water out in that aquifer. That understanding, all the monitoring that we've done in that area has been fed into a model, a groundwater flow model, and that model is nearing completion. We will be using that model and running scenarios on it. So what happens if there's more building that happens in the Paulden area? What happens if we
have a drought?
A longer, prolonged
we've been in
drought.
A drought, but a longer drought. Right?
Yes, a prolonged drought, maybe a worse drought, which would be a nightmare scenario. But also, what then would occur if the city and town actually start pumping out there? So we've got a very powerful tool that is being worked on right now. Just had a meeting on that today, in fact. So we're nearing completion on that. We're going to be exercising that model, making sure that we understand the dynamics of the system according to the model. And then we hypothetically would be building infrastructure to get the water here. There are multiple steps, many years down the road here, but eventually we could be getting water from the Big Chino.
And it has big costs associated with it.
Does.
It has engineering challenges, and I think that you've highlighted things that we want to make sure that we're directly, addressing, and that's we want to protect the Verde River.
Yes.
That is an asset of not only our region, but our state, but the country. It's a flowing river. We want to protect it. It's got fish species in it that we want to make sure can continue to thrive and exist. So there's a lot at stake that is going into this model. We want to be very cautious about whatever decision is made.
Yes.
And again, it's in partnership with the city of Prescott, with Salt River Project has a big seat at the table. I know the Nature Conservancy and other organizations have been, certainly concerned and want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So this is going to be an ongoing project that we're working on with Prescott and SRP well into the future.
Absolutely, yes.
Can you, kind of our last question, and you and I we could literally spend hours talking about water.
I could literally be pontificating for
just for the
hours
viewers,
yet.
We have literally a standing water meeting, sometimes every week, every other week at the very most. And we spend a lot of time talking about all of these different water projects, water initiatives, where we're at, what we're doing. So one of the, I think, other exciting things that you're going to be working on is a conservation plan. What is a conservation plan, and why is that important? Why do we need to be thinking about that?
So essentially what it's going to do is look at what the town is doing as far as conservation initiatives, irrigation in. Also incorporated into that are what can we do to encourage conservation amongst our customers, right? So, we might be looking at initiatives, incentives to
What would that, like a rebate?
A rebate program, potentially.
Let's say and I don't know what the conservation plan will entail, but an example could be, let's say you have an older toilet or something that uses a lot of water. There could be potentially a rebate to get a more efficient toilet that saves them water, saves us water.
Yeah. We do have the advantage here in town in that our housing stock tends to be
new.
fairly new. Right. So, toilets may not be the answer. What I would like to do.
Hot water circulator?
Yeah, or hot water circulators, dishwashers, appliances. Okay. They tend to use a lot of water. Also, faucet aerators, shower heads, low flow shower heads. Literally, shower heads these days are pretty amazing. They can literally cut down your water usage by like a third, by 2/3. So it's, there are a number of initiatives I want to look at that we could be thinking about strategically, per dollar, per acre foot, which ones are going to be the most useful.
So you'll be working on that plan this next fiscal year.
Yes.
And then rolling that out to the public as just another piece of all of these different things that we're doing to really make sure that our future generations of Prescott Valley have a sustainable water supply.
Yes,
and very exciting stuff.
It's important that we lead by example too, I think. So that's why thinking about what we as the town and town infrastructure, what we can do to foster that, I think is going to be incredibly crucial.
By us leading in terms of making sure all of the public facilities are showcasing these water conserving measures and other technologies, other projects that we're working on, that we give hopefully ideas to others in the community, businesses, private individuals that may be able to replicate some of that at their own individual property.
Exactly.
Awesome. Really good work, Tracy. We really appreciate the work that you're doing. This is such an important issue for our community, and it's complicated. It's very complex. There's a lot of layers to it, but we really appreciate you kind of sharing a whole bunch of different things that the town is working on, and hopefully that gives some reassurance that there is a plan, and we are working towards making sure that we have a very bright and dynamic future for our community. Well, that's about all for the time we have for this episode today. And today's episode was talking about water. We did take a little bit more time than what our normal episodes for PV in Focus are going to be. But we really wanted to emphasize and have an honest conversation about a topic that is very concerning. We hear a lot about water, and we wanted to make sure that we shared some of the information and projects and initiatives that we're working on to make sure that we have a long-term water strategy for our community. We really appreciate you joining us and want to remind you that you can also find this as a podcast wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Just look for PV in Focus. You can also find a link in this description for this video. If you've enjoyed it or learned a thing or two, feel free to share it with your friends or other residents so they can join in the conversation as well. We'll be releasing episodes on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. Until next time, be well, and we'll be taking care of PV.
We'll be taking care of PV.